Also, before we go any further, since it appears that the school committee has a quorum, would Carrie Nee call the school committee meeting to order?
Thank you, Mandy. I can call the school committee meeting to order at 7:05 p.m.
Thank you. And would Joe Fisher call the Board of Select Members meeting to order?
Joe, I'm asking you to unmute yourself. Can you see that?
There we go.
Thank you.
Calling the meeting of the Hingham Select Board to order. I believe we have Liz Klein here and myself, Joe Fisher, and Bill Ramsey will be joining us later. He is actually at another meeting. So thank you, and we look forward to this.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, Joe. So thank you all again. We have a very, I think, rigorous conversation that we're looking forward to this evening. But before we get into all of that, we have a few other things that I just want to get through very quickly. I'm excited to have this conversation, and I hope you all are. First of all, I just want to, on behalf of the Hingham Unity Council, express our sincere thanks to all of you for being here. I know, and Hingham Unity Council knows, that there are many things that compete for your time. We also know that you wouldn't be here if you didn't care about these issues. And so again, on behalf of the Hingham Unity Council, thank you for being here. In particular, I want to say thank you to the following very special guests that we've invited to join us this evening. From our Hingham Public Schools, we have Dr. Jamie LeBlois, Assistant Superintendent, Carol Perez, Hingham Medical Director. HPS principals, we have teachers and school committee, obviously school committee members. From our town government, we have Joe Fisher, Liz Klein, Bill Ramsey, also joining us for this call, and thank you for being here. And also, we have some advisory committee members who are here. From the Hingham Police Department, we have the chief himself here. So thank you, Chief Jones, for being here. Deputy Chief O'Shea is here, and Lieutenant Marquardt is also from the Civil Rights Office is also here. Also in attendance is Officer Ford from the School Resource Office. We want to say thank you to our state senator, Senator O'Connor. Senator O'Connor, as I always say, has provided a very important listening ear to the Hingham Unity Council, and we thank you for making the time to be with us this evening. Also, thank you very much to the members of the Interfaith Clergy. And to everyone that's on this call, I am told that over 230 people, families registered for this program, and many of you are already here. We cannot say thank you enough. We know that you are here because you care about these conversations. As difficult as the conversations are, you are here, and for that, we want to say thank you. And on just a quick note, I know that there is also one family from Canada that has signed up, that's on this call right now. And so Hingham Unity Council is reaching, as I said, far and wide, and we thank you for joining us for this call. I'm going to now call on Katie. For those of you who don't know Katie Sutton, she really is a rock star and leads the Hingham Unity Council. So I'll call on Katie to just get us started by speaking briefly about the Hingham Unity Council and what we have coming up next. Katie.
I'm going to ask you guys to bear with me for just a minute. Unfortunately, I think that the capacity for my Zoom is not, I'm going to upgrade my plan right now because I don't think we can get everyone in the room. And I did not realize that. So I'm going to have to upgrade. And we get the rest of the people in the room because we had 200 who registered, and that's why it stopped at 100. So I guess I'm not a rock star because this is 100% my fault.
It's a good problem to have. Take your time.
A good problem to have. Ness, are we able to start getting anyone in now? Yeah, it looks like, are we able to get more people in now? I'm hearing some noises that are promising.
We are able. Thank you for doing that.
All right, how
Sorry
are
for
you?
stressing you out.
No, that's my own fault. I forgot that I upgraded last time for the last talk, and then somebody else did the disabilities on there too. Okay, sorry for that little blip. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to spotlight myself for a second. Okay, so deep breath. Hello and welcome. I want to start by thanking you all for being here. It's a crazy time of year, as Manny said, and we really appreciate you being here. It truly speaks volumes about the kind of community that we live in to see all of you people here. So thank you. I see a lot of repeat customers out there in the Zoom boxes, so I'll try to keep this brief. We were formed 2.5 years ago. We had input from many community members in an effort to create opportunities for neighbors to get out and talk face-to-face about issues that were troubling to them. Since that time, we've sponsored events, forums, celebrations, and other initiatives. And we've been identifying and addressing some of the local policies and systems that might be contributing to a less diverse and inclusive Hingham, including by working with state, local, and school leadership and our police department, as well as networking with our neighboring South Shore communities. In fact, we now meet monthly with representatives from groups that are like the HUC in Cohasset, Duxbury, Hanover, Hull, Pembroke, Scituate, and Weymouth. We're also meeting monthly with groups across the entire Commonwealth. Some of our Hingham Community Council leadership has formed a sister organization, the Hingham Families of Color, which is a space for people of color and their families who live, work, or go to school in Hingham to connect and support one another. You can currently find them on Facebook if you'd like to join. The HUC continues to keep in close touch with this group so that relevant decisions that we make and actions we take will be informed by their perspectives. More than anything, the Hingham Community Council is seeking to create opportunities for respectful, open conversations about difficult issues. There's just so much going on, in our schools and beyond in our community. And we know that many people are, shocked and saddened to learn that there are adults and children living here and learning here who don't always feel safe and supported. And we believe that if anything's going to change, we have to talk about this stuff. So we seek to provide places and opportunities where it's okay to ask questions that might feel a bit awkward or uncomfortable, as long as you're listening and trying to understand different perspectives. It's our goal to limit judgment in these dialogues so that we can all grow together and work toward building a community where every member feels that they belong. So we have a lot of exciting stuff planned over the next months, including more panels like this one. We're super excited that we're going to be partnering with Hingham Pride in the spring for a panel of intergenerational members of the LGBTQIA+ community. In addition, we'll continue to plan social community building events like the Hispanic Heritage and Juneteenth celebrations as we continue to seek to get to know our neighbors better and celebrate all the members of our community. Lastly, but most importantly, Usha, Tien, Glenn, and Paige, on behalf of HUC, I want to thank you so much for being here tonight. We know that none of you is here with the hopes of becoming the next great Zoom recording sensation. You're here for one reason and one reason alone, and that is to make our community stronger. Courageously sharing your stories and giving us the opportunity to ask questions is an act of complete selflessness, and we will all be better for it. So thank you. Really excited what I know will be a rich and important discussion. And I need to thank my good friend, Manny Opong. I know how much work that you put into these, getting ready for these panels, Manny, and you are frankly a treasure to our organization and our community. So without further ado, I will return the conversation back into your capable hands.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Katie. You're going to go back to sharing the, so next I want to just talk briefly about how the evening is going to unfold. Some of the introductions that you've already seen. Right after that, I'll be speaking very briefly about the norms and how to create a safe space for these conversations. And then we will begin to get into the real meat of the evening, which is meet the panelists. And then after we've heard from our panelists, we will go to the other side of the meat of the event by taking questions and answers. And then after that, of course, we will wrap up the evening. So let me say this very quickly. As a person that's been on the other side of this, today my work is very easy because all I have to do is sit here and moderate the conversation. But I have been on the other side of this, and I can tell you that it's a really brave act for anybody to show up in front of their neighbors and be vulnerable the way that our panelists have stepped up to do today. I ask that as we go into this, that all of us think of the bravery that it has taken for them to step forward, and for all of us to be open and respectful of the conversation that we want to have. Having conversations about race is never easy, but we believe that it is work that must be done, and somebody is going to have to do it. And our panelists have decided that they will be the ones to do it tonight. And so we hope that, just as Katie said, that all of us can express gratitude to the members of our community who have stepped forward to do this. Katie, could you move to the next slide? Okay. So in a moment, I will be introducing our panelists. But before I do that, I just wanted to kind of set the table for why we're here today. So as I was preparing to do this, I started looking around for information about, incidents of hate against the AAPI community. I didn't really have to look far. I searched around looking for different things, but I just went to the website of the Stop Asian Hate, and pretty much everything that I had seen in other places was just in one place for me to see. And so I just wanted to share just a few things that stood out for me to help set the table, and then we will get to the other side of this. Between March 19th, 2020 to September 30th of this year, a total of 10,370 incidents of hate directed at Asian American Pacific Islander persons were reported to Stop AAPI Hate. Of those hate incidents, 4,599 occurred in 2020 alone. That's 44.4%. And 5,771, that's 55.7%, occurred in 2021. The reason I wanted to bring this up is that you realize that as we go, and we still are in 2021, and we are already ahead of 2020. So this is not something that is decreasing based on these numbers. Nearly 1 in 5 Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, have experienced a hate incident this past year, 1 in 5. And it breaks down to 21.2% Asian American and 20% Pacific Islanders. Of those, verbal harassment constituted 62.9% and shunning constituted 16.3%. Physical assault represented 16.1% and online harassment represented 8.6%. Civil rights violations such as workplace discrimination, refusal of services, and housing discrimination and stuff like that account for 11.3% of the incidents of hate toward AAPI community members. And I would like to know that hate incidents against AAPI women represented 62% of those reported incidents. And children under 17 reported hate incidents by 9.9%. So why are we here? Why are we here today? We are here because HUC believes that until everyone in our community feels safe, we cannot call our community safe. And we believe that the actual voices of our community members must be heard. The last time we were here, we had, I believe, another very rigorous conversation, and all of you who attended the last time really participated in a very positive light, and we are looking forward to having another good conversation tonight. Our hope is that by hearing the voices of these community members, we will all dedicate ourselves to the work that must be done to make our community safe for everyone. And with that, I will turn my attention to the stars, the real stars of this evening. Most of you already know me, and thanks for the introduction earlier, Katie. My name is Manuel Pong. I'm a Hingham resident. My kids go to school here, and I am a licensed psychotherapist. Usha, you can get Usha to introduce herself again, but what I would say is Usha is originally from India. Usha has lived in Hingham for the past 42 years. She's an IT professional, a co-founder of Saheli, a South Asian women's support group against domestic violence. She's also a member of Nantasket Hall Rotary Club and the district's DEI committee. Tien Suarez is the mother of 4. 3 of them are still in Hingham Public Schools. I know that one of them recently went to college, and all of us wish her well. Tien has lived in Hingham for 13 plus years and worked across many different industries in HR. She loves traveling, live music, cooking, and spending time with her family and friends. And I can say that I have experienced Tien's cooking, and she is right about that. Glantney. Glenn is a father of 2 boys, both with special needs. Glenn is married to our very own Kerry Nee. They have lived in Hingham for 15 years. Glenn works at Good Samaritan Hospital as an anesthesiologist. Paige Shetty is a 2016 Hingham High School graduate. And Paige has lived in Hingham for a long time, 18 years. So thank you for being here. Thank you, all 4 of you. You really inspire me, and I'm sure that I'm speaking for all of us on this call right now. Before I get to you, let me do a couple more kitchen table things. So if you are here and your plan was to text your friends on here, please know that chatting is muted. If you have a question and you go to the Q&A, it will go to Katie. Katie will receive all the questions in the chat, and then Katie will send them to me. I will do my very best to ask as many questions as possible. I know that the last time we had several questions that we couldn't get to. And as you can tell, today we're trying to move a little bit faster to get to your questions. So we'll do our best to answer as many questions as possible. Please send your questions via chat so that Katie would have access to them, and then Katie will send them to me. And Katie and I have a secret way of getting the questions from her to me. Finally, I should also mention to you that the experiences that we are going to be hearing about tonight are the individual experiences of our panelists. We're not calling ourselves experts on race. We are here only to share the testimony that we have. These are our experiences that we're sharing. And so we would hope that all of you will regard what you're hearing from us today through those lenses. Katie, do you want to move on to, okay. So with that said, I am going to invite you, Usha, to share anything that's on your mind about your personal experience with all of us. And thank you again.
Thank you, Manny, and thank you, HUC, for giving me this opportunity and to talk to all of you in the Zoom boxes today. As Manny said, I'm a longtime resident of Hingham, and my son, who went to Hingham High School, is living in Cleveland now. And I'm going to share today with you my good experiences and not so good experiences in this town. But let me start with my good experiences first, because I've had plenty of them as well. When we moved here 42 years back, I was welcomed by my neighbors to a point that with one family, we celebrated Christmas and Thanksgiving until our kids got married. And all the other 4 families that lived around, I became good friends with them. And today we still call ourselves 4 sisters, and we get together very frequently. I made friends during my walk, and they're giving me all the support. And when I had a life-changing event this year, my friends became my lifeline, and HUC community became my extended family. And thank you very much for that. So not so good experiences. I'll talk about it's a raw and honest conversation. And let me quote Henry David Thoreau, who said, "It's not what you see, but how you see things." And people see me and my family as a person of color. And we realized earlier on that if you're white and wealthy, one is accepted and easily assimilated in this town. But if you're neither, you will never assimilate. Even if you're intelligent, with high honors, and with a stellar record. They found my son interesting and very culturally aware and culturally rich. But then he was a threat. He was called, "You Indian boy." He was called a nerd, and sometimes very politely called cerebral. And all this, what does this do to you? It leads to identity crisis. And you become very vulnerable, especially when you are a teenager and you're socially ostracized. And it's breakdown of your self-worth. And that's what I saw happening to my son. And he just told me recently when I was telling him that I'm going to be talking about this, he said, "Mom, you want to be, when I was in school, you want to be like others, but you are not. And they make you believe what you are not." So those were some of the background information I wanted to provide about my son and his upbringing in Hingham High School, in Hingham schools. And then let me preface my own experiences by saying that I'm a proud American citizen, but a perpetual foreigner because of my color. I carry a baggage, and I've become color brave and very comfortable in my own skin. I also know that I will never be part of this local tribe or ever assimilate with the local culture. And what I've experienced is very subtle, but not overt observations. And I could say implicit and explicit biases. 9/11, I used to took boat to work every day. Coming back, for the first time, I was scared in the boat. I felt like an outlier. And when I got home, I always go for a walk, and I could not. I was afraid to step out of the house. And it continued for 2 or 3 days till I became my brave self again. And I said, I have to go and face it. Other incident that comes to my mind is visiting a restaurant. And the first time we went, you got a good seat and we were happy. So we went again, and there was a management change. And I asked to be seated in a specific area, and they said, no, that area is reserved. So of course we said there is no reserved sign on the tables. And they said, no, that is reserved. And they put us near the kitchen. And I said, no, thank you. We don't want to eat here. And we walked out. Some of the other interesting observations, and these are just something, my observations, is when people walk by and we're working in the house, doing some work in the yard, and some new people who haven't seen us, they ask us, do you live here? It's not one time, it's happened quite a few times. And they think, well, we are just a landscaper or some hired help that is doing the yard work, because my husband and I both love doing the yard work. And the other one is when I walk with my friends, people don't make any eye contact. They will just talk to my friend and just think I'm invisible. And it's very noticeable. And I just walk away from that scene at that point. So, and also lastly, the get-togethers. I go to an event, or you go to somebody's house, nobody approaches you. I mean, you are just like sitting out there unless you make an effort to go and meet people or introduce yourself. But nobody ever comes and says, hi, I'm so-and-so. So there is that thing about person of color that they are not like us. So there is no need to get to know them. So I don't have much time to talk about more, but I've got so many things I can talk about. But I just wanted to end with James Baldwin's observation that not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can change until faced. And I think that's very applicable to all of us here, and hope we will all learn from it. And Katie, in your introduction, you had mentioned that let us engage with all the people and their stories. And I would say, let us start with their journey at this point. And thank you very much for listening to me and taking time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Usha. That was, thank you. Thank you. I'm sure that when we get to the questions part, you can pick up on other examples if the questions permit, right? So I'm looking forward to that. Next up, I am going to call on my good friend Tien to share her journey and experiences with all of us. Tien.
Thank you, Manny. Thank you, HUC. Thank you for all the people that is attending tonight and taking the time to listen to some of our personal experience. I actually carry a very heart tonight. Before I start, I want to kind of introduce myself again. My American name is Tien Do Suarez, but I was born in Vietnam, and my grandfather was proud to give me a Vietnamese name. And actually, my real name and how it's pronounced is Do Tien Tien. No one ever calls me that. And most Asian people that come over here, we have to change our name or adopt an American name so we're not made fun of. And a lot of times teachers at school want to automatically change our name. That's what happened to me when I was in grade school. And so I was proud of this name, and I started looking to see, what is this name? And this name was really, my grandfather named me, and it meant, my first name meant angel, my middle name is heaven, and my last name was successful, accomplishing, passing, and I think about those meaning, and I think how beautiful they were, but how oftentimes I don't even think of them because my name has changed to Tien, and that's all I hear most of the time, and since grade school. And so I think of this journey, and I think of my American journey, and I left Vietnam as a refugee, fleeing during a time with fall of Saigon, where many refugees was coming over to different countries, and America had opened their door for many refugees looking for political asylum. And fortunately, we had wonderful strangers, people in America that was protesting and asking for these immigrants to come in. They didn't know us, they didn't know our language, they didn't even know our food, but they were taking a leap of faith, but they knew humankind. And so my first interaction with American culture was out of kindness. So I bring that story thinking that even with everything, there were people that was tough growing up in America at a very young age. And part of that was just learning the culture and acclimating, didn't know the language, and how people just didn't give us a second look, a second chance at that time. But as I worked really hard in school, as my parents pushed me, I made sure that I got rid of my foreign accent so I wasn't made fun of. There's sometimes a few words here and there still slip that my kids remind me. They catch it all the time. And I worked so hard so that way, people don't recognize sometimes when I'm talking to them over the phone that I was a foreign person, because I didn't want people to second guess my intelligence or my background or my intent. And those are the things sometimes I go into. Oftentimes people would talk to me, even in Hingham, and said, Jesus, I don't even hear an accent from you. And I laugh about it thinking, well, I kind of went to all the grade school and I worked really hard. So I was kind of proud of some of those compliments, even though after all these years, 40 something years being in America, I get those type of language. Or I get people say, you people do really good nails. I get that often, when I think about all the Vietnamese that have come over, the entrepreneurs, the business, people in the medical field, people in all different industry. I've worked in sports entertainment. I worked in Fortune 500 company. I worked in biotech. I worked in nonprofit. So I think about those things. And I think that sometimes majority of Americans think that Vietnamese people tend to work at these nail shops only. But what they're not realizing is that a lot of these people that work in these nail shops are human beings, and they also have different personal experience and journey. And they may have been doctors and lawyers and teachers, caretakers, all different kind of workers on their homeland, but they had to flee just like me. So as I traveled my journey in America, I was fortunate to meet my husband at college. We've been married for 23 years, and we are a multicultural family. His family is from Uruguay, and my family is from Vietnam. Together, we have 4 children, and we lived in Hingham for 13 plus years now. We chose Hingham, just like most people here, picturesque. You see the red, white, and blue, such an Americana town. And you also see, you know, as you looked into all the stats, because my husband is a stats math guy, of how the rankings of the school. So that was quite critical. And when I talked to most people here, school was their #1 reason to moving to the town. And so we looked at the census and we realized that was a high percentage of, you know, not a percentage of that was welcoming to many different backgrounds. But that was okay to me because I thought, well, we could be part of the census and help this community. Little did I know that it was a little bit more challenging than I thought coming over here. Even though I spoke the language, my husband spoke the language, we went to work, there were a lot of little things that happened to me and to my family. And it was very difficult. The name calling of Chinese, kids would come home, putting their eyes wide apart, singing that song, "We Are Chinese," and that's still happening today. You know, or the fact that one of my daughter was called a brown bee at the playground. Now, kids can be mean, but particularly the fact that, you know, they do call each other name. And she wasn't disturbed that she was called the B word. She was disturbed that she was called brown, attached to the B word, you know, because the outside in, people do look at what's outside first, and it happened to be the color of her skin. Or the fact that my son comes home asking me what is our nationality, afraid that I would tell him that we were some Asian descent because he was hearing kids at the playground talking about the Chinese virus. Now, as parents, we worry about our kids. We worry about journey of life. We worry about a lot of things. That's typical when children are growing. But on top of that, there's layers of the race, makes it so much more difficult, I remember my daughter, one of my daughter coming home, asking why her skin color was the way she was, and why wasn't her name Emily, or why she didn't have light hair and light, beautiful skin that looked like snow, and, you know, blue eyes and stuff. And she just didn't think that she was attractive. She didn't find beauty in herself. I think it's just because everybody around her was just so much the same. So these are the kind of conversation that as a family that we have to have conversation with our kids, on top of just building their self-confidence, staying, you know, in school, being kind to other. It's about accepting their own self and being confident within themselves. Now, I have all these stories about myself, but I have to share that I've had so many Asian people in our community and Asian students that have contacted me with their own personal story, and I feel the need to share them as well. I have them here that I would read some out, and I wanted to protect their identity as they were sharing with me. When they send this to me, and I had so many different emails, calls, and texts, I was carrying such a heavy heart. I was crying so much. And partly because I just didn't know if I had it in myself to really come out and share some of these stories. And it reminded me so much what I was going through, what my children was going through, and it's still going on now. Here's someone from a current student that said, when I was in middle school, a boy asked me in front of several of his friends and my classmate if I had parents who were illegal immigrants and if they could vote. I immediately responded and said, we were legal and I was born in America. He then said my family would be deported when Trump would be elected. As a 6th grader, I was extremely embarrassed and that this was being brought in front of several other kids, and also hurt that he would target my race and say such awful things to me. Another example is from a group of kids. We were walking in the square with a few friends, and 4 grown men followed us and kept saying, "Ni hao, ni hao, ni hao" to us as we're walking along. We were really scared, and they were going to do something to us. Somebody else wrote to me, "I dread going on the school bus. Kids were always teasing me and oftentimes spoke to me as English was their second language." Someone else wrote, "As classmate asked me if my parents were illegal immigrants and asked me to say her name in Japanese. I can't even speak Japanese." Here's another one. "In school, I would get pushed or nudged walking down the stairs and hallways purposely by a few boys. They often called me illegal immigrant, made fun of my eyes, and called me several other derogatory names. They laughed and laughed together as I went to school daily and felt scared." I have pages and pages of stories. I also want to bring up that several adoptee Asian kids had contacted me and also said that they're stuck between 2 worlds, that people expect them to know where they're really from. That question comes up a lot, instead of seeing who they are as a person, as a human being. So I think that's something that we should keep in mind. As leaders and administrators that are a part of, these kids are looking for support, for looking for sense of belonging, for looking for sense of culture, acceptance. And by having this, it makes it so much easier for them to navigate the difficult teen years, as you know. Thank you, HUC, for having me here. Thank you for listening to my story.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tian. Thank you. And I will now call on you, Glenn, to go next.
Hi, thank you very much for having me here today and to listen to my story. My name is Glenn Nee, and I'm married to Carrie, who you know serves on the Hingham School Committee. We are the parents of 2 boys who both have special needs, and they're 17 and 14 years old. I work as an anesthesiologist at Good Samaritan Hospital in Brockton, and we've lived in Hingham now for about 15 years. I was born in Columbia, South Carolina, to Chinese parents who recently arrived from Taiwan as graduate students. Both my parents were refugees from the Chinese Civil War, and they were young children when they were brought over from China to Taiwan to avoid capture by the communists. And we're very grateful to the United States for providing aid during that time, both to protect Taiwan and to provide food aid during that trying period. After they finished college, they moved to the United States for their graduate studies. And in the 1970s, there were not that many Chinese living in Columbia, South Carolina. You know, we were viewed as curiosities many times. People tended to stare in public. They would come up and ask where we were from. The newspaper put a picture of baby me in the child care facility I was placed in while my mother was at work. And it was people were just very interested in finding out about us at that time. In elementary school, I was the only Asian in my class and one of 2 in the school. You know, racist name calling and teasing, it was pretty common in that period between all groups. And at that time, I actually thought it was pretty normal, just because of the frequency of what was going on. Now, I have some negative memories about race growing up. There were times where strangers would tell you to go home. Or as you pass by them, they would make funny noises as if they were speaking Chinese to you. They would make slanty eyes at you or take a kung fu stance or something like that. You know, frankly, it was just kind of irritating and embarrassing. My mother told me a story of how after she became an engineer, she was confronted by a lab tech that was working under her, who I assume it was a threat, but told her that he was an officer in the local KKK and really not to mess with him. I don't know if it was true or not that he was in the KKK, and I have no idea what ended up happening to him in that situation. Well, we moved around the country with my mother, who worked as an engineer for DuPont. We moved to New York, West Virginia, Delaware. As time passed, a lot of this uncomfortable racial behavior seemed to decrease. And I don't know if it was because America was becoming more multicultural, or we were moving to places where there were more Asians and people were perhaps more used to seeing Asians around. But still, you would have inappropriate behavior on occasion. Here in Hingham, it's been wonderful. We love living here. Our neighbors are wonderful. I haven't experienced any significant racial issues myself in Hingham. However, over the past several years, I've become more concerned about the changes that are occurring nationally, especially as you have increasing tensions between China and the United States. And this became just kind of outright high anxiety and fear in 2020. And this is a story we've kind of all lived through by now. The COVID epidemic hit. I would go to work with dread in my heart. We would have a hospital full of sick people. I remember giving reassurance to patients and then intubating those who were in respiratory failure. And these people were my age or even younger. And within a few hours or a few days, they would be dead. And it was very, very scary. I didn't know if I would catch COVID or if I would then pass away from something like that. And then there was this other thing. At the same time, we started to have an increasing amount of fear and anger against Asians. And there were increasing reports of violence against Asians in around the country. And this was despite the fact that hate crimes were decreasing in the country at that time. Hate crimes against Asians were increasing. And I honestly didn't know what to do. I was worried about getting COVID. I was worried about getting assaulted, going to the store. It was a frightening time. And other than going to work, I didn't really leave home very much. But, similar to Usha's story, as time passed, the fear kind of passed. You go to work, come home, and you just avoided contact with people. Became less fearful of COVID as well. Masks were powerfully protective, and COVID at work tended to spread amongst those who didn't have masks and who were talking to each other in the break rooms. Vaccines were a game changer. And I started to go out more. I noticed that violence against Asians tended not to occur in so much in the community, though I have heard stories from people that I know where it did, or threats of it did occur. As going into the future, I feel that as tensions continue with China, this affects the image of all Asians living in this country. And my hope is that through these talks that we're having with the community, we can come together and reduce fear and hate.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much, Glenn. And now I will turn to you, Paige, to share your journey and your story with all of us.
Thanks, Manny, and thanks everyone for having us here. and given me the opportunity to be with you tonight. So my name is Paige, and I am a 2016 Hingham High School graduate. Grew up in Hingham and still have my family living in Hingham. Both of my brothers have gone through the Hingham public school system, and although one has since graduated, my other brother will be graduating as class of 2022 this spring. My dad's family comes from India. He was born there and moved to the States as a kid, while my mom's family is white and I am mixed race. As a mixed race person from a mixed race family in this town, we've definitely had, you know, our share of incidents and experiences in this community, but I really want to make sure that I emphasize that I think that, you know, rather than seeing this all as a negative, it presents a great opportunity for all of us to take a collective responsibility to make sure that we are continuing to listen and learn and evolve so that we can make this a wonderful community for everyone who wants to be part of it. You know, with that being said, I think my earliest recollection of having someone call out my race was an incident that took place in elementary school. A fellow classmate had asked me if I needed to clean my arms because they looked quote unquote dirty. You know, at first I didn't really think much of it and innocently went to go get a paper towel and try to clean whatever it is he saw off. And when I realized that the paper towel was coming back with nothing on it, that I think that was kind of the first moment I made a connection between how someone else saw the color of my skin and then what that meant to them. And, you know, we were young kids at the time that it happened, but, and I don't think that that particular person at the time meant any malintent by it, but it was still a connection that he had made between the color of my skin and his own perception of what that was, and that I had become aware of it. There were other, you know, formative experiences related to my race throughout my time at Hingham. One time I was at Target and was checking out, and the cashier had insisted that I got a really great spray tan, and it was almost funny at first until I had told her that my dad was from India, and when I said that to her, she said, "Don't tell people that." There have been plenty of other times when I've told people that I was half Indian, and they've asked me questions about whether I spoke another language or celebrated any holidays. And when I said that I didn't, and that we, you know, celebrated Christmas, we didn't really celebrate Diwali, for example, I only spoke English, they would often respond with the phrase, you know, "You're not really Indian then, so you're not really Indian," as if that means anything, but also as if white was the default and as if there were qualifiers to my Indianness. I've had people tell me before very willingly that they've only thought of me as white. So that kind of default to whiteness has kind of just continually been reinforced throughout my time. You know, there are larger incidents as well that my family and I have faced. I think the illegal immigrant kind of name calling has come up a few times throughout our conversation tonight. And ironically, my family and I were out on Main Street waving flags for an American soldier coming home when a car drove by and yelled out the window and all called us illegal immigrants when that happened. And, you know, that was the first time I was called that, but hasn't been the last. So there's definitely, you know, more of those larger and very explicit incidents such as that as well. But something that I really want everyone who's here on this call today to consider through these stories and through everyone's stories that have been shared tonight so far is, you know, how this can impact the way that someone sees themselves in the world and how they believe the world sees them. And putting that in the context of a town like Hingham, where oftentimes there's very little representation for people of color and people who are Asian American. There's just very little representation that exists. And this can cause a lot of strain and damage on things like self-confidence and self-worth and the way that you see yourself. I actually saw a tweet last year that says something to the effect of, how old were you when you realized that you weren't ugly? You just grew up in a predominantly white town as a person of color with little to no representation of people who looked like you. And I had shared that on my social media and got a lot of feedback from people of color, those both from Hingham and those from other places as well, who resonated with this notion greatly, and the idea that you're inherently ostracized because of your appearance, and the way that that affects you. And I do feel, you know, that this kind of begs a greater question about the idea of seeing color. And I think that, you know, sometimes when we don't see color, we're not really able to see and fully empathize with and understand other people's experiences and how these experiences impact the way that they see themselves and the world and we them as well. You know, there's also, of course, the added experience for people who are mixed race of having people force their perception of you and quote unquote what you are into one box or the other. You know, oftentimes people might only think of me as Indian. They might only think of me as white, but it's never really both, and it's never really fully one or the other either. I'm never going to be seen as fully white, and I'm never going to be seen as fully Indian. And in some ways, I do think that this is a result of a refusal to really see other people's experiences, or at least look deeper and see other people's experiences and how we see the world. So all of that being said, you know, I really want to thank everyone who's spoken so far for their vulnerability and willingness to share tonight. That's just one little piece, one little sliver of my life and my story, but I hope it's something that people can learn from, and if not, at least think on, and look forward to some of these questions from Manny coming up. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for representing your community so powerfully. Thank you for bearing the evidence. I am so thankful to all of you. Now, please feel free to send your questions in. I can tell you that I'm already sitting on about 10 questions, and I'm going to start to go through this very quickly. So the first question, just because this questioner specifically posed a question to you, Tien, I'm not picking on you, believe me. This questioner put the question directly to you. So this question comes to you. Have you or your children been stereotyped or put in uncomfortable situations? What would your advice be to teachers who want to be inclusive while being respectful?
I have a lot of experience with that. It's been wonderful. First of all, I'd like to start off that the number one reason why we came to Hingham was for the public school system. And when I was shopping around for schools, I called all the principal. At that time, East wasn't here. And the one principal that stood out to me was Mr. Cormier. And he took time to answer some questions for me. And he made it easier to be honest and the fact that we were not very cultural diverse here, but he was willing to embrace that and welcome that and to share that with the community. And I remember him saying they just don't know what they're missing out in. And I remember falling in love with that. But, you know, there's been an incident where my daughter was in a history class and they were reading the refugee book. And this particular teacher was looking at the roster and saw my daughter's name. Her last name was Suarez. So said her first name and her last name. Looked at my daughter and asked if she was a refugee. I remember her sharing this and she just felt just so awful. And, you know, and I was like, what did you say? And she was like, I just looked up and was like, no, you know. And then he continued to ask her, are you sure, and stuff, you know, because of your last name and stuff. I don't know if he was joking. It was just trying to make some light of it, or he was trying to, you know, make some type of reference. But at the end of the day, it made her feel horrible. It made her feel like she was something, did I look like a refugee? What did refugee look like? He didn't know my story, or maybe he did. I've never had these conversations with him, but the fact that he looked at the roster list, pointed her out, was a very difficult time for her. And I think it was a time when she wanted not to be mixed race of Asian and Hispanic, didn't want to be dark at that time. So, and then also did not want to make a big scene in her class. What if could have been different was The Refugee. I read it. It's an incredible book of triumph and journey and experience and what these amazing refugees had, gone through and back. Partly part of my family story. That should have been celebrated without pointing any other student out, and or like not having a student welcome that or share that, because teachers can find that out in an open question. And there may be students that say my family or I have this without necessarily pointing that particular that student. So that's been part of one of my examples.
Thank you, Tian. Usha, the next question I have comes to you. What attempts should be made to create inclusivity and cultural awareness? What do you think we should do in our schools and community? You're muted, Usha.
Sorry, I think both the inclusivity and the cultural awareness starts at the top, whether it's corporation or it is in the community, it's the town administrators, it's the school committee members, and whoever is running the town. That's where it starts and it filters down. Educators, etc. I would say we have to hire culturally sensitive leaders and school professionals who are aware of what can be done, and they're diverse by themselves. Bring some more diversity into our school system. So we're bringing people of different nationalities, different culture, so they can educate the children accordingly. Teach kids in school to give due respect and how to engage with others. People who even don't look like them, even try to accept them because they could have language barriers or certain disabilities. Make them inclusive. Teach the kids this basic raw facts as what can be done. Getting to know everyone in your class or in your school, it will be mutually beneficial to you and to your whole school and to the community in the long run. I would say encourage the children to read the books from different cultures. I mean, we need to focus on that. There's so many books, even if they're fiction, but they belong to different cultures. You learn so much from it. And there's so many books available these days from all different parts of the world. And if you meet someone, do not just stop by saying hello at that point. Try to get to know the person and embrace that person. And same thing applies for the person who's being approached. Don't give on that, because you will learn something. You will increase your knowledge, your boundaries, and learn to accept and respect people. So I think we can start from these small, few basic things and learn to be more inclusive in our town.
Thank you. The questions are flying in, and I'm keeping up with them as we go. Glenn, I have the next question for you. This questioner says, I am white with white children at the middle school. When my children are confronted here or are witnesses to racist behavior, what should their line of action be, other than speaking out directly to the individual?
Well, and it really depends on the situation, because, in a social situation with your friends, and what if it is your friend, confronting them can be very difficult. But sometimes you kind of need to do that. And it's hard to say, it depends on your comfort level with confronting your peers and your friends at that time. At where I work, if there is a situation where you need to report an incident, there is an ombudsman that you can find and talk about these issues too, to represent you, perhaps to find the right person to talk to. And that may be something that the schools could probably utilize, some kind of representative or counselor that students, and they have counselors that students can feel comfortable approaching to get advice from.
Thank you very much, Glenn. And Paige, I skipped a few questions to come to this because this was also specifically for you. This person says, this message is for Paige. Thank you for sharing your stories. For the young people of color who are in attendance, would you like to offer a word of encouragement or advice?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question. I think it's hard. It's definitely each own person's own experience, but I think the advice that I would offer is that you are in charge of how you see yourself in the world, and people might say negative things or do negative things, but you are in control of how you are going to navigate the world and how you are going to respond. I think I wish growing up that I had more confidence in myself and more, I guess maybe a more firm understanding of my background and who I was to be able to, stand up to people when they say things, or be able to just kind of confront any uncomfortable situations that I run into. But I recognize that takes experience and that takes time. So I think the other piece of advice I would offer, which I think is going to sound a bit contradictory to what I just said, is that, it's okay if you don't have a great comeback or a great way to confront an uncomfortable situation. Sometimes it is okay to protect yourself and just walk away. If you are in a situation where someone is making you uncomfortable, or you're trying to report something and people are not responding to it, it's not weak of you to walk away. It's not, it doesn't say anything about you to walk away. Sometimes it is just about your protecting yourself in a situation where that's not already happening. So, I think just really around taking charge of your own situation, taking charge of how you choose to navigate these situations, and really recognizing that your own self-worth is not determined by any kind of box or stereotype or notion that people choose to put on you. So I know that's a lot, and there's a lot of different layers to that, and to that question, and to a potential response. But I think that's what I would say first and foremost.
Thank you very much, Paige. Tien, the next question comes to you. This questioner says, did any panel member feel attacked by some claims of the Chinese virus? How did you handle this situation? I picked you for this, by the way.
I know I'm in a safe space. I purposely didn't really add it in my introduction, as you know, and I wasn't sure if I was going to go there or not, because it's something that I have been going through some difficult time. So I have been a victim of someone that, because of the rise of the scare of the Chinese virus, there were a couple of people, sorry, I'm shaking a little bit. There were a couple of people that approached me one day and was yelling at me with several different things, but also tried to hurt me with their cart and some other things. So I always thought I would react a little bit different if somebody ever did something, because I was always never afraid to use my voice and always taught my kids to also speak up. But in that moment, I did everything opposite. I was scared. I was afraid that I was going to be followed. I was afraid for my life. And not just that, but also the misconception, because I felt like they had dehumanized me. They didn't know that I was a mother of 4. They didn't know that I was a loving wife, a good friend, someone that contribute to their community. They didn't care to know. All they did know was that I look Asian, and that's all they needed to know to try to do something to me. You know, I had suffered a little bit, and my family has too, and my husband has been my rock. He has been with me some dark days, as well as helped me through some few nightmares. And I have my crew and my PP that has been there for me. So, you know, they have been helping me get my strength. I just had a neighbor that came over right before the talk and gave me this card that said, "Nothing can dim the light that shines from within." And when those people did that to me that day, they took that away a little bit, because I became scared, but I also had time where I didn't want to go out. I was afraid that someone would attack me or my family. So it took me some time to gain that strength. And that was just one incident leading up, you know, to that. There have been other incidents in Hingham in terms of, if I was speaking Vietnamese on the phone with my father, someone would stop me and tell me that this is America, you speak English here, you know. Or if I was campaigning for a school committee member, I remember I was there on Main Street with my daughter, and a car pulled up and basically told us to go F home, we didn't belong here, you know. Or some other stories where I was walking around and somebody was pretending that they spoke an Asian language, was no close to it, but, you know, was making those sounds that most people think Asian people sound like to me as walking around town. You know, so those things are kind of connected towards what people believe, or the Asian stereotypical type, or the virus. So it has had a lot of impact. I'm choosing to share that tonight because I know that from some of the letters that I have received from some of the current high school kids and some middle school kids and kids that graduated, said, please share some of this, because I am going through this Asian hate. And I've also been victims of it. Just like the stats that you mentioned, Manny, I am one of those stats, and particularly the fact that I didn't report it.
Thank you very much, Tian. Usha, I'm coming back to you. This questioner says, I have witnessed kids' bad behavior, bad racist behavior and language on school grounds, and feel the school administration feels it's not a problem if they are not reported. There is fear among some students of color and other students, so they don't report. What do you think school administrations can do to help prevent this culture of acceptance?
And that's a very good question under this climate with recent incident in Hingham High School. I think we need to build the capacity of the educators and the administrators and provide them the necessary resources to meet these challenges, because these challenges are becoming more and more frequent now. So there definitely needs to be some training and understanding so they can cope with these kind of situations. And also, there should be no culture of acceptance from anyone, whether it's in playground or in the classroom. School bears the responsibility. So I think all students feel safe, so they can all feel safe, secured, and to be able to focus and learn from there. Because if these interruptions keep happening, I think it's not good for them, it's not good for their growth, it's not good for their background and acceptance. Fear only exists and will continue to exist if the victims are afraid of retaliation, and if they report it, and if they know there is a policy and the policy is transparent, they will not be afraid to report it. But if it does not happen, they will not know what to do. They will hide away and not talk about it. And this atmosphere will continue. You also asked what the school administrators can do. They should talk about what happened when it gets reported, why it happened, and what can be done to resolve it, and what's wrong with this whole situation. And also provide cultural sensitivity training to the school administrators and to the school teachers, and generate some kind of an interaction and concerns and discuss the different viewpoints. And I think having a diverse staff will make it much easier for people to understand what's happening around them and why it is happening. So I think it just comes back to your original question of inclusivity and cultural awareness. And we need to stop this from happening, not only in the playgrounds, but everywhere else in the school and on the streets of town of Hingham. Thank you.
Thank you again. Glenn, I'm coming back to you next. How should we handle when teachers, coaches, captains, and other leaders of our school make references to some racist comments?
That's a tough one, because these are folks who have a kind of a clear power differential with the students. So they're the ones in charge, and it's many times it's hard to approach them directly, and they have power over the students that they are overseeing. So there needs to be some mechanism in place where a safe way for these students to talk and report these issues, because it should be a learning experience for everyone, and there should be an opportunity and a way for the folks who created these issues to learn from it and to adjust their behavior. And the only way you can do that is by having feedback. But to speak up, they have to feel safe speaking up.
Thank you very much. Paige, how should younger people be exposed to the topic of racism and intolerance?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think something that is kind of worth considering, especially for those who may have children that are not kids of color, is that it's just worth thinking about. Kids of color are really forced to reconcile with their race and what it means quite early on. And oftentimes, I think when we talk about having conversations about race and how uncomfortable they really are, especially when you bring in young kids into the fold, it can often be a response of, oh, they might be too young for that, but it's often at the same age, if not younger, where kids of color are really forced to reconcile with their race, either through more explicit racial incidents or through some of those smaller microaggressions that I outlined. And I think it's a tough question too. I think there's definitely some consideration of, you know, the type of area that you live in. I think in a town like Hingham, where maybe there's not a lot of representation, it's definitely important to, in whatever capacity, you know, make sense for the kids or the families involved to, you know, not shy away from some of the difficult conversations of what other kids their age might face and why it's not okay. We don't need to bring in necessarily at a young age inappropriate language, but I think it is important to say, you know, or to raise the point that, you know, we can't call out these kids for being different, or, you know, their family might have a different background. It doesn't make them, you know, different from us in a negative way. There's so many great books and resources that are out now. And I think something really positive that I've seen increase over the past year and a half or so is the growth of children's libraries that contain just a number of books that introduce the concept of race to kids, talking about racism, talking about ways to talk about racism. So, you know, if this is a conversation that people are looking to have with kids at any age, you know, there are resources at your fingertips online and, you know, through others that you can leverage to make sure that we're going about this in a way that I guess is not more damaging or is appropriate for kids. So I would say that by all means take advantage of some of those resources that we have as well, because you know, I feel like those haven't always been available. So.
Thank you very much, Paige. So before I ask the final question, I really want to apologize to all of you. I know that you sent in questions. Some of the questions were similar to those I was asking, so I'm hoping that some of you already got some answers. If you didn't, I apologize. This is on me. I've been the person going through them and asking the questions, so I'm sorry that I didn't get to yours. This final question, it's actually, it just came in, but I think it's important, and it goes to all of you. So whoever wants to, you know, take this, feel free. Does anyone have experience with reporting an incident either to school administration or police? And would you be comfortable sharing the outcome? Underline comfortable. If no one has an answer, okay. Paige, it's on you.
I'm happy to go for it. I haven't reported anything kind of officially to someone like a school principal or to a police officer, for example, but I have been in conversations that have focused on uncomfortable topics and topics around racially motivated or related microaggressions, macroaggressions. You know, I've talked about different pieces of my story that I've shared tonight to other folks. You know, I'm thinking of people that maybe were in slightly more authoritative figures than myself that could have been camp counselors growing up, maybe just teachers that I felt more comfortable with. And, you know, I'm struggling to name a specific incident, but I think one thing I really want to mention is that so often in these conversations, especially when I was talking to someone who wasn't a person of color about these incidents, the response was often along the lines of, I'm sure they didn't really mean it like that. I think you took it the wrong way. I don't think that that's what they intended. And in a lot of ways, kind of using my experience in kind of neutralizing the conversation, either because they were uncomfortable or maybe they were trying to make me feel better. But I think either way, I can look back on those now and understand that whatever the intent, it maybe was not the most appropriate response, kind of given the conversations that we're able to have now. So I know that that's not a specific experience, but I think maybe one lesson from that would be that if someone is sharing an experience with you, whether it's in a way to report something or they are just opening up to share an experience that they had and are looking for support, you know, I at least speak for myself. I don't know that I speak for everyone, but you know, based on my personal experiences, I got uncomfortable with the response. I don't think they meant it like that. I don't think it was intended to be that way, because it feels invalidating. It feels like what I didn't experience, it shouldn't have been real. You know, so I think it's when you are in a situation like that, it's really important to validate and simply just believe what the other person is telling you. And so I apologize. I know that's not like a concrete kind of situation, result, outcome type of scenario, but that has been my experience just with what reporting and talking about these things has kind of looked like for me, at least. So.
Thank you. We've gone over 10. I see your hand is up, so I'll give you 30 seconds.
Okay. Thank you, Manny. I was just going to add on to the fact that, you know, the burden shouldn't necessarily be on the person that had, you know, was, you know, something has done to, particularly in school environment where, you know, there's administrations and there's teachers and everything. I would just say be a little bit more attuned to what's going on, be a little bit more aware, because a lot of time students of colors, they are watching what we're doing as adults, you know, and I think that is so key. And if we're reacting or not, you know, having that culture of trust for or channels for students of colors or anyone that reporting any type of racist incident, then they're not going to feel comfortable. And I hear that over and over and over again. I've actually had one student that shared me a story where she was at a swim meet and somebody called her the wrong, you know, like, you know, she was at a swim meet and then like another teammate happened to come back from a vacation, was visibly darker. And then this other teammate said to that teammate that came back from vacation, wow, you look like the wrong race. You know, you look just as tan as this particular person that was Asian, you know, so those things are so hard to report sometime, but I think that she said even she did report it, you know, but because it didn't happen on school ground, they didn't do anything about it. And so when you create a culture like that, students of colors don't feel like there are channels for them to report these incidents. And so I think, you know, the adults, the administration, the community need to set something in place for a safe space for reporting. I know there is a line now that people can report that is anonymous. Just know that there's also HUC. There's a family of colors page on Hingham Families of Color. So those are channels now that students of colors are reaching out to and feel that they are supported and have like a different network. But because they're in school, much more than they are in other places, it's very important to have those in place at school.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. I know we've gone over. Thank you all for your patience. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you to HUC. Thank you to Usha. Thank you to Glenn. Thank you to Paige. And thank you, Tian. Your bravery really stands out, and all of us, on behalf of everyone that was on this call, I just want to say thank you to you for coming forward and sharing your stories with us. You have made our community better, and we thank you all for it. On that note, thank you very much. Please check out the HUC website. There are a few more things coming up. I'm hoping the next one we'll do is our collaboration with the LGBT QI plus community. So please check it out. We will send out information about dates and stuff like that. Thank you and good night.
And I
Thank
unmute
you
everyone.
very much.
Thank
You
you.
can all clap
Thank
your
you.
hands
Thank
and
you.
tell the panelists how amazing they were. That's why I asked you to unmute if you're.
Thank you. Yay.
Sorry.
Great job, everybody.
Both
you.
officials.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Adjourn.
Carrie, may you make a motion to
Courageous.
adjourn the school committee meeting?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Carrie's closing the meeting.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
I want to say
Select
aye.
board, select board, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second it. Liz,
Aye.
is Bill on? And then Joe, aye. Thank you. This was a great learning experience and your community leaders are listening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for coming. Thank you, Liz.
Joe, thanks for doing this. Great job, everybody.
Thank you all.
Okay, I'm going to put people in the waiting room now, guys. If you guys want to
If
hang
you
out.
could please just stay on for
Yeah.
another couple of minutes.
Yeah, I'm just going to put anyone who's still here in the waiting room so that we can chat. Thank you so much for coming, everyone. Goodness.